Now, to finish off, I just want to share some general guidance if I've managed to convince you to go down this route. Those of you who've worked in corporates have probably heard of the acronym SMART. And if you have, I apologize, but I am going to recommend it. And if you haven't, SMART reminds us that we should be specific. We should be able to measure the outcomes. Because if you can't tell whether something's done or not, you can't make people follow it. It should actually be something people can do. There should be a point to it. It shouldn't be there for the sake of it. And the other thing is, it's got to be pragmatic. It's got to be timely. There's no point asking people to jump through so many hoops that they never will, or you actually don't give them enough time to. So you've got to be pragmatic about this. It's helpful every now and then to take some time out just to go back through the coding standard and just see if it really is as clear as you think it is. And a good way to do that is actually to listen to new people when they join the project and listen to the questions they're asking. Yeah? They're not asking them because they're stupid. They're asking them because your standards need improving. Be clear. Make sure the standard is clear that you're trying to hit. Make sure it's clear where it needs applying. So there's no confusion about when it doesn't and doesn't apply. Make sure you know who it's impacting. Developers work on different things. Sometimes you may need to give them a bit of guidance to say, you know, you're a front-end dev, so you need to pay a bit more attention to this. You're a back-end dev, this is really aimed at you, for example. Yeah? Make sure you're clear about the problem it's preventing. Make sure that knowledge is somewhere. So clearly I think that the why is not as optional as I'd like. And make sure you've captured how important it is to avoid these problems. Okay? Get your criteria right. Another thing, anytime anyone's writing rules, that process is open to abuse. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Once people know there's a set of rules, you will get people trying to hijack it for purposes other than quality. So if you are the curator or custodian of these rules, you need to make sure that what's in there is actually necessary. Make sure it's preventing real problems. We love to invent imaginary problems, spot them, and act as a gatekeeper and don't let them in. It's handy if most of them's built on experience. So sometimes they may lag behind your organization, sometimes they're not as proactive as you'd like, but it has the advantage of standing up more rigorously to testing as a result. And watch out for people who are inserting standards just to control people. A certain percentage of the population, whether we like it or not, that is their motivation. Watch out for them. The bigger the project, the more likely you are to come across them. Here's another key thing. Buy-in. I personally prefer developers to be actively maintaining the coding standards. I hate Confluence because you can't send pull requests to it. Yes, multiple people can edit at the same time as a remote tool. That's great for that. But I'd rather they were in Git so people can send pull requests and you can encourage them to do so. If the developers feel like it's their document, they will take more pride in the work and be more likely to follow it. Watch and see if people actually are following it or if they're just doing the absolute minimum necessary to squeak through. If the people are following the minimum, you don't have buy-in and you need to figure out how to fix that. And if it is being imposed down on high by somebody, you've got a big problem in your culture. You all really have. Chances are you've got lots of other problems as well, and this is just a symptom of it. I always like to remind people, you cannot fix technology, or shall we say international treaties. Sorry, you can't fix people problems or international treaties with technology. Be careful with it. Okay, so what do you think? Do you want to share your experience of working under those kind of standards? Because it was very positive for you.
Yeah, it gave me a very nice big club to wield the edge management, to actually get some stuff fixed.
So Chris was working on a project that I was auditing with these style of standards. And the project It needed a little bit of a change of direction, I think it would be fair to say.
But I think you too.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but it was a project been running several years, and then the standards came in afterwards. And because these standards were brought in by everybody, including the management Chris was reporting to, Chris was able to use them to build a case to change things beyond how individual lines of code was written. Would you say that was fair? Yeah. Please, come on now.
So PSR2
Yeah.
is a thing where you can just tick a box or run a line in Travis.
Yeah.
And that is both a strength and a weakness because it can only include things that can be automatically tested, and as we've seen, it makes it a little bit toothless.
Yes.
How much of this kind of coding standard do you think could be automated?
I don't know because I don't use the automated checker tools. I used to use Scrutinizer. I haven't used the ones that have come along since it, so I don't honestly know. If I was automating, I would actually be focusing on Square rather than this, which is ISO 2500. You can automate that. I don't know anyone who's done it yet, but that's the standards I would automate because they would have the biggest impact of all. The way I would say this is almost a training manual for people. And I think training works better when it's done in person. And it's actually treated as a teaching exercise myself. Doesn't mean other opinions aren't equally valid, of course. But problem with automation is if it's done for you, are you learning anything?
Hopefully, because you've got the feedback loop at least.
Is there actual feedback? Just because the file has changed, does that give you feedback?
But if your build fails on the standards, you'll be like, okay, no, I didn't do that right.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to fail every time, so maybe but you miss the why still.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm old. I've worked in the pre-web industry where we had no automation at all. Christ, we didn't have programming languages like you've got when we started out. So we learned everything the old-fashioned way. So I don't know what it's like coming to the industry today. I can't relate to that, so I honestly don't know.
That was a sort of a point. I'd probably look to automate anything with minor on the standard. So they're the kind of things that should be fairly straightforward for people to follow, and therefore fairly straightforward to automate.
Okay.
So that would probably be a fair start.
Okay. I guess thinking about it, if the end result means it's people are habit forming, I could live with that. Because I believe that quality and excellence primarily is a habit. You do it not because someone's checking your work, it's how you work all the time. If you follow, I would always recommend, especially when anyone's interested in going into management, you should study and follow elite sport and look at what the things they go through to perform, rather than our industry. And you'll see there how all the drills they do, etc., is about forming these habits of excellence primarily. So if the automation achieves that, then maybe. But if it means people are actually switching off and they're not actually developing a habit, what they're doing is they're just unconsciously going through stuff without having learned it and then internalized it, that I would have concerns about.
So for teams that are currently running PSR2 on build and don't have anything like this and can't afford you as a consultant, like what's the starting point? Is it start to put together small standards and a code review process, or should you make a big standard and then like what? I feel like, I'm not sure about everyone else in the room, but this is far from most of the PHP teams that I've worked in or indeed consulted into. So what's the first step if this is not the reality of us?
Well, first of all, I would establish a code review process. I've done a talk about that at Cambridge 2 years ago. I don't think it was videoed, I think it was before I started videoing the talks, but the slides are certainly online. And I'm very happy afterwards if anyone wants to ping me with questions about those. I would start with the code review process. So this feeds into the code review process. I don't think this stands on its own. This is an instrument you use in something. And then what I would recommend is you start with a blank piece of paper. If you're not sure how to lay out the coding standards, copy mine from this talk, and just write one. And as you're going through coding standards, look at the questions you're asking each other, spot where you're making decisions and agreement between each other, and just write it down. And then evolve it over time. As Lorna says, it is expensive to sit down and actually build these as a dedicated exercise. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, was it, for me for this? I can't remember, it's too many years ago now.
I only saw the end result.
Yeah. It was probably 2 months full time. So what's that? About 320 hours full time producing the first version of this for that particular project and program of work. And then it evolved from there. It was a living document. But I'm a big fan of iterating rather than big bang if you can. So that's what I would recommend. Thank you all very much.